live. Hey guys, thank you all for coming. We are so excited to have Kiersten White back here again. We've got her new book, The WRETCHED WATERPARK, which you guys haven't already started. It's so much fun. We've got sort of like Whitney Snicket with Scooby-Doo, and Cookie Fun, and it's got so much delightful humor. This is contrast. If you haven't already gotten it, a little bit darker, a lot darker. This her book Hide, which came out last week. Awesome horror novel. I highly recommend it. It's just creepy. We've got two different amusements. We've got basically like the Camelot Rising versus it's even darker, but so much fun. But we are so thrilled to have Kiersten back here. She's one of my favorite people in the world. Please give her a good.
Thank you so much for coming on a Friday night. Probably the only person who's taller. I took a COVID test an hour ago and it was negative. Is everybody comfortable with me taking off my mask? Yeah, okay. All right. And I'm triple vaccinated and all that good stuff. Okay. If you guys want to move if the microphone is blocking you, because again, I am extremely short. Thank you so much for coming. I'm so excited to be here tonight talking to you about my middle grade series debut, WRETCHED WATERPARK. Because yeah, as Rob was saying, one amusement park wasn't enough for me. I did have one of my editors, Jen Huddle, who I work with Star Wars Padawan, say like, what was going on with you? And I was like, it's 2020. I was stuck at home. I just wanted to ruin a bunch of amusement parks. So WRETCHED WATERPARK is the first book in the Sinister Summer series. I can now say it's more than 3 books. So it's been super fun as I've been working on them. Actually, I think this might be a new record. 4 books in the series are completely done before book 1 ever even came out. So I've just been living in the Sinister, I've just been living in the Sinister Summer world, and it is just so much fun. I get to indulge all of my like silly macabre sensibilities. I have really enjoyed writing middle grade as opposed to young adult, because one thing I never have to do is describe the sensation of being attracted to someone. I'm so tired of figuring out new ways to describe someone as attractive. In fact, in book 2, one of the main characters finds a girl that he sort of has a crush on, and so the way that he deals with it is by feeling sick to his stomach and avoiding her. And I was like, yes, this is the type of attraction I enjoy writing. So the main characters are Theo and Alexander Sinister Winterbottom. And I do laugh every time I remember I got away with naming my main characters Sinister Winterbottom. And they are twins who have just been dropped off to stay with a previously unknown aunt for the entire summer. In the middle of the night, it's kind of weird, rush circumstances, and then their parents are just gone. And along with their super technology distracted older sister Will, who's on the back of the cover. I love these covers so much, by the way. I'll talk about those later. They are just suddenly dropped off. And their aunt doesn't know what to do with children. She doesn't even know whether or not children need to eat. One of the first questions she asks them is, if I set out a little bit of food in the morning, will that be enough for you all day? And they're like, we need to eat at least as often as you do. She doesn't know how often that is. So the first place she takes them is to a water park. And my childhood summers were filled with water parks. We had 2. We had the one where you could get a discount if you went with an empty Coke can. So we'd all be in the parking lot and Mom would be like, drink faster, drink faster. We'd all just be chugging our Cokes so that we could go in for $2 less, which, you know, when you have as many kids as my parents did, is a big deal. Called Magic Waters. And the lifeguards at Magic Waters were very cute. Again, that feeling of being attracted to someone that makes you sick to your stomach. That was my childhood experience at Magic Waters. And then the other one was Seven Peaks, and Seven Peaks was pretty cool. They had a wave pool. And the best thing about the wave pool is whenever I went in it, I was sure I was going to die the entire time. So it was fun getting to write Alexander, because I gave Alexander a lot of my childhood anxieties. I was pretty sure that any and every event was going to lead to a horrible death as a child, actually as an adult too, which I channel into, writing horror. But you know what water parks are like, right? You smell the sunscreen and everything is in bright primary colors. And anyway, they're not really my aesthetic, if we're being honest. Obviously. And so a few years ago, people often ask where ideas come from. And usually I have like a really cool story. Like, oh, I was inspired to write a gender swap version of Vlad the Impaler when I was traveling around Transylvania with my husband. Or, oh, I have this really cool backstory with this one. I read a tweet. But I didn't even really read a tweet. I read a tweet wrong. And I thought somebody was referencing a Gothic water park. And I was like, oh my gosh, a Gothic water park. Are you kidding me? That's the coolest thing I've ever heard. And then I realized that was not what the tweet said. I had completely misread it. And it was not, in fact, about a Gothic water park. And there was no such thing as a Gothic water park. Because those two sensibilities are kind of opposites, right? And so then I was like, well, I want to build a Gothic water park. Not in real life, but just fictionally. I want to build a Gothic water park. And that idea just stuck with me. And I was trying to find my way back into middle grade. Middle grade was my first love as a reader and as a writer. And then eventually I settled on the sinister Winterbottom twins, who are having a very, very peculiar and downright sinister summer with this strange aunt who keeps taking them to very, very typical summer vacation activities that are all slightly twisted and made absurd and also macabre because, it's me. So yes, Wretched Waterpark is the first one. I love it so much. I don't usually do readings, but because I also don't usually do middle grade, I'm going to do a little reading for you. So this is from chapter 2. So the kids have already met Aunt Sophronia, and she has already demonstrated she doesn't know, whether or not kids eat, which is it's kind of a crucial childcare thing to know that children do in fact eat. So she's taking them to the water park. Here we are. Aunt Sophronia sounded as relieved as the three sinister Winterbottoms felt as they tumbled out of her ancient metal beast of a car. She drifted along the roads in the same way she drifted through her house, distracted, never quite focused, and with an air of confused distance, none of which were ideal qualities in a driver. Aunt Sophronia rolled down her window. Though the day was windy, her hair did not move. Get the week pass. A week should be enough time. Enough time for what? Theo asked. Yes, exactly. We need time. We don't have it yet, but we must get it. Do you understand? Really? Really no, Alexander said. Will wasn't even listening, but Theo looked as confused as Alexander felt. Find what was lost, Aunt Sophronia said, and there was something strange about her voice. It went from sounding sort of like an echo to sounding like a rumble of thunder. Theo and Alexander felt it. They both nodded without quite knowing why. Very good. I'll pick you up when it gets dark, Aunt Sophronia said, her eyes fixed on a point far above their heads. Outside, I mean. It might get dark in many ways far before then, but you are good, brave children. She drove away without another word. Fantastic, Will said, not looking up from Rodrigo. Rodrigo is her phone, by the way. Her phone, who is her third favorite member of the family, and no one knows who comes in behind her phone. A week at a water park. If our aunt wasn't going to bother watching us, why didn't Mom and Dad just let me be in charge? I'm going to walk into traffic now, Theo said, testing her. Hey, Theo, Alexander said, do you think this knife is sharp enough? Here, hold out your hand. Will had not heard a word, thus proving why exactly their parents did not leave her in charge. Perhaps if Theo and Alexander had texted Will that they were going to go get matching tattoos or were ingesting poisons in small doses to increase their tolerance, she might have responded, but probably not. Why do you think they left us with Aunt Sophronia? Alexander asked. And do any of you remember her ever being mentioned? Will, have you met her before? Will just grunted noncommittally. I'm busy, she said, fingers tapping. I don't really listen when Dad talks about his family, and Mom never talks about hers, Theo shrugged. Doesn't that seem weird? That Mom never, ever talks about her family, but suddenly we're with a sinister aunt? Is she Mom's sister? Married to one of Mom's brothers or sisters? Does Mom even have any brothers or sisters? And doesn't Aunt Sophronia seem too old? Theo suggested. But that wasn't it. She didn't look old, like as in wrinkly and decrepit. She looked old like a photograph you find in a box. Youth captured but frozen and faded, long gone even though it's right in front of you. Alexander opened his mouth to share that thought, but Theo had already moved on. She liked movement and hated standing still. So, the water park, Theo said, hands on her hips as she slowly turned in a circle. Where exactly is it? Aunt Sophronia had dropped them on the side of the road. The trees were old, green and gray, heavy with trailing Spanish moss. A few steps into their shade lowered the temperature by several degrees. The only thing they could see was a gravel road leading into the forest. Alexander rubbed his arms against the sudden chill. Maybe along this road? Theo went confidently in that direction, followed by Alexander and less quickly by Will, who navigated much like a bat with echolocation, only without the echolocation. She stumbled on the occasional route and walked directly into at least one tree, neither action peeling her eyes away from her phone. Theo ran her hand through her hair, making it stick up wildly. She had been trying for low maintenance and ended up looking a bit like a young brunette on Albert Einstein, not Alexander Einstein, his lesser-known brother. It's a sign, she said. Alexander thought she was being metaphorical, referring to their being lost in the woods as a sign that their entire summer was doomed, until he followed her gaze upward to an actual sign. In rusting wrought iron, curling and twisting more elaborately than the ivy trailing from it, a gate stood. Along the top, in imposingly sharp letters, was written, "Fathoms of Fun Water Park." Yes. So I'm so excited to invite you into Fathoms of Fun. Inside, you will find they have a strict dress code. When you want to get a meal, there are no Coke stands. There are absolutely no churros. But Mysterious Galaxy did give me one in honor of this book. No churros whatsoever. There are no hot dogs, no greasy slices of pizza, no ice cream. But you can join them for tea time. You can choose whether you want to wear a tuxedo or a dress. The preference is up to you. But the dress code is strictly enforced. And I'm afraid that today for tea time, they are serving jelly deal and mincemeat pies. So every child's dream. It was super, super fun getting to design a water park. I got to lean into the fact that as a child, I was sure that I was going to die on all these slides. Like, the really like vertical ones, I was like, I would fall off of that. And I mean, I know like physics wise, it's not possible, but I could just picture myself like falling off of it. Or the tube ones, even though I was about the size of a toothpick, I was sure I would get stuck in them and then either drown or suffocate. I had really elaborate ways I was going to die on each and every element of a water park. So the slides, instead of being bright colors, actually extend from a tower in the center with gargoyle tongues lolling out for the slides. The wave pool is called the Cold Unknowable Sea. And actually, somebody recently went into the Cold Unknowable Sea and didn't come out again. Just disappeared. So, a lot of really fun things going on at this park. And Alexander and Theo have to get to the bottom of it in order to save their new friend Edgar, maybe save themselves, and maybe, just maybe, get a churro before the end of the summer. So if you guys have questions, I would love to answer them. I just really, really love this book so much. Yes. Thank you. Yes. Yeah, I did actually. So speaking of Hyde, which is my adult debut and is a horror novel set in an abandoned amusement park, I sold Wretched Waterpark and Hyde around the same time. Not deliberately, but they were both books that I've been working on for a few years before I finally found the time to finish them. Thanks, pandemic. And so I have a niece and she's an avid reader, and I was like, she's my target audience. And so I printed out a copy and I was like, I gave it to her, and my sister texted me and she's like, did you just give my 10-year-old a copy of your new book? And I was like, yeah, I think she'll really love it. And my sister's like, do you think it's appropriate for her? And I was like, well, yeah, it's set in a water park. And she's like, I know, but she's 10. And I was like, oh, you think I just gave her Hyde? No. I did not. I did not give your child Hyde. I gave your child Wretched Waterpark. And it was so fun getting her feedback because she caught all the little clues. She's like, oh, I think that this is going to end up being really important as the series goes on. And I was like, I think you're my ideal reader. I also have my own 9-year-old. He just turned 9. And it was really nice for him to read it too, because I call him my cherub goth. The first thing he taught himself to draw as a toddler were skeletons. His entire room is actually filled with skeletons, to the point where we had cousins over and they all wanted to sleep in his room. And 5 minutes later, we opened the door and they're sitting up crying because they're so scared. And my son's sitting in his bed like, I don't know what's wrong with them. Like, I tried to take some of his skeletons for Halloween decorations last year, and he's like, but Mom, they help me sleep. And I'm like, Oh, baby. But he is like the kindest, gentlest, sweetest child. He doesn't like watching shows with a lot of violence or where people are mean to each other. So I really tried to work in that sensibility because I was a very similar child. Like I remember when The Nightmare Before Christmas came out and there were commercials for it, and I was like, that's everything I've ever wanted in my entire life. And I begged my parents to take me because I really liked macabre. I really liked minor key songs. Like I liked all those things, but also I was a very, very tender, very anxious, very frightened child. And so I couldn't access a lot of it without being too scared to function. So the thing that I did in the Sinister Summer books is there are those sensibilities and there are mysteries and there are maybe some spooky things going on, but there's never any threat of physical violence to the children. The children are never in like physical harm's way. No one is going to harm them physically, which was really important to me. And there's absolutely a place for that in children's literature. There's a place for everything. But in these books, I wanted to make certain that the threat against the children was always being placed in the care of someone who didn't have their best interests at heart. And so yeah, another like good qualification, I guess, is when my son was reading this, he said, "Mom, I like this book because every time I feel like it's getting maybe a little bit too scary, it turns out that it's just funny instead." And so I really played with that idea that horror and humor are basically the same language. You take the familiar and you twist it into the unfamiliar, either in an absurd way for humor or in a horrifying way for horror. And so I really tried to play with that in these books and write them for the kids who want those things, but aren't ready for more intense content. And I try to be very gentle with these characters because, again, I'm a mom. I have kids. I have a child this age. And so I very deliberately wrote Alexander as a highly anxious child. And I acknowledge that in the book. And I invite readers to imagine how it would feel to move through the world constantly worrying that everything was about to go wrong. And then Theo's the opposite. Theo has a really hard time understanding her feelings. Everything in her translates to either anger or boredom, like a lot of children who have sensory processing issues. And so it was really important to me that even though these are silly, fun, absurd books, that the children are very real and they're going through very real things. So yeah, I very much wrote this as somebody who absolutely loves middle grade and always has, but who also really loves children that age and has children that age, and also 33 nieces and nephews. So, I've got a large readership. So I really, really love this series, and I hope that it finds its audience because it speaks to all the things that I loved as a child and I love as an adult, and then also kids who are very special to me, the things that they love and the things that they feel. So, and also, can we just talk about this cover? So the artist is Hannah Peck, and my designer is Carol Lee. And I sent them. I'm not good at covers. My publishers learn very quickly not to ask me what I want. And so when they asked me my ideas for covers, I said I wanted to have a very sort of like classical feel. I said, we're thinking Edward Gorey, we're thinking Lemony Snicket, we're thinking, we're thinking kind of those more like throwback covers, and from a sheerly mercenary point of view, I was like, all these parents, all these kids who grew up reading A Series of Unfortunate Events are now parents. And so if we have a cover that sort of speaks to that same type of story, they might be more likely to pick it up for their kids. But it's been so much fun getting these covers. They far exceeded my expectations. They're absolutely delightful. They're the only covers, like I don't ever judge authors who print off their covers and frame them and put them on their walls. I just have too many. This is book 20, but I will absolutely get prints of these 5 covers because they're like vacation advertisements, right? To a bunch of vacations that I actually really want to go to. So anyway, yes, I love the cover, and the design is super fun too with the back, and then they're the chapter designs. At the beginning of every chapter, you've got the same tower and the little waves at the bottom. So anyway, just want to shout out Hannah Peck and Carol Lee, who are wizards. Yeah, it's so nice working with professionals who are good at things that I'm not. Because I'm not good at a lot of things. I'm good at like one thing. So I need a lot of people who are good at all of the other things. Are there any other questions? Yes. Yeah, I always wanted to do siblings. Also, I really like the idea of twins. As a kid, you were always like, what if I had a twin? And I think kids really romanticize the idea of twins. Whereas I was friends with twins, and it was not, it's not very fun and dramatic all the time when you have somebody that you share every single milestone and every single thing with. So I liked the idea of siblings, and even closer than siblings, twins. And that way I could have two main characters, a boy and a girl. Who were the same age. But yeah, I really like sibling dynamics. I've always loved writing about sibling dynamics. If you've read any of my books, a lot of them feature sibling dynamics very heavily. I have 4 siblings. I have a sister 2 years older and a sister 2 years younger. So I did have siblings really close in age to me. And I think that push and pull makes for really interesting storytelling. And then I also liked adding the older teen sister. And I kind of approached it as, if this were a YA novel, she would be having an entirely different story where she is the star and she's doing all of these these cool things with tons of intrigue, and she has her love interest, and she does experience feelings of attraction that I don't have to describe because she's not the main character. But yeah, I really tried to frame it as Will is experiencing an entirely different story than them. And every once in a while their stories line up and they were like, wait, what were you doing? Wait, what were you doing? So it was fun getting to write more sibling dynamics and have kind of an age gap and the tension that comes with that too. Yeah. Yes. Now I'm trying to remember. Does it? I have a very short attention span. I think, yeah, they share chapters, so the perspective that the twin that it's on will change within the chapter unless they're separated, and then it's more distinct. But yeah, it is a third person omniscient, but just with with Theo and Alexander at the center of it. Yeah. Yes. Ooh, my favorite middle grade stories to read. I like the funny and charming and weird ones. I like the big action adventure fantasy ones, but often I feel like there's just not really that much there for me personally as a reader, even though those are the ones that my kids absolutely love. I think my favorite recent series that I read was Small Spaces, but is it Catherine Arden? Yeah, I loved those books. I'm so excited for the next book because I feel like she walked that line so well with. They are scary, but they're not too scary. Actually, they might have been too scary for me as a child. And my son and I read Scary Stories for Young Foxes together, which again, that pushes it. That's a scary, scary book. But he loved it so much and he wanted me to read it so that we could talk about it together. So that's what I love about scary middle grade is it lets kids experience those feelings in a safe way, and then hopefully ideally they have somebody to talk about it with. But yeah, I love books like that, the stories that are really intricate, maybe a little bit scary, and I love the ones that have the really sort of lush writing that they can kind of sink into. I wrote these ones very playfully. They're I would love to hear that they're read aloud as a family, because I do read them aloud to myself as my last editing step, just to make sure that everything sounds right as you're reading it out loud. But yeah, I mean, middle grade is just joyful. I love middle grade. It's so much fun. Yeah. Yes. I kind of, but it will probably violate copyright if I play it over the live stream. So when you get home, there's a band called Moon Hooch, and they have a song called Platform 9. And it's entirely instrumental. It's just brass instruments. So it's like a saxophone and a trombone, and it's unhinged. I don't know how else to describe it. My husband found it. He likes watching those NPR Tiny Desk concerts, and it was on one of those. And they modified their instruments by sticking a traffic cone in them. And as I'm listening to it, I'm like, this is either the worst thing I've ever heard or the best thing. But I'm pretty sure it's the worst thing. And then I listened to it again and again and again, and it just had that right combination of high energy, but also slightly unnerving. There's something wrong with that song, but in a way that I like. So that was my song, actually. Again, speaking of unhinged, we were driving in the car and my husband was in charge of the playlist, and thinking he would be funny, he turned that song on and I was like, no, turn it off. And he was like, what? And I was like, no, that's the song that I write Sinister Summer to, and I'm writing a different book right now, and if you play that song, my brain will go to Sinister Summer and you're going to mess me up. Turn it off right now. And he was like, are you serious? Both that you physically cannot listen to this song right now because it will mess you up, and also that you are listening to this song over and over and over again while writing an entire series. And I was like, yes, I'm serious. Turn it off now. I'm so much fun. I'm really excited for you to all go home and listen to that song and be like, her? Yeah. So that was I bounced around, but that was the one that I landed on. So yeah, I've listened to that one, probably hundreds of times, and will continue to listen to it because I still have to write the last book. Yeah, if I'm writing a series, I listen to the same song the whole time, which is why I listened to Yellow Flicker Beat by Lord 2,500 times while writing the I Darken books, because those were really long books. Yeah, can't tell you a single lyric to that song, though. So, yes. Mm-hmm. So once I figured out these books, once I cracked them, they're actually the easiest and the most fun to write of anything I've ever written. It just took me a really, really long time to figure out the right way to tell the story. I actually started out as a writer trying to write middle grade, and I was not ready yet. And so it took me a really long time to figure it out. I do have one other middle grade novel called Beanstalker and Other Hilarious Scary Tales, which is like fractured fairy tales, where I kind of figured out more of like voice and tone and who I wanted to be as a middle grade writer. And then once I finally found my way into this story and figured out like the overall plot and who my characters were, these are actually the easiest books to write. I tend to draft them in about a week. Revisions aren't super intense, but also it helps that they're only between 35 and 50,000 words. So, the difference between editing a 40,000 word novel and a 100,000 word novel is a lot, because there's just so much more material. So yeah, these are actually the easiest and most fun things for me to write right now. But it took me a dozen years of being a professional writer to get to the point where that was the case. I think that I do have a voice that lends itself well to middle grade. I just had to figure out the right way to use it, basically, and the right story to tell. Because I wanted to try to do like the big long fantasy ones, because my favorite series as a kid was Redwall, but I just don't have the attention span for them, if we're being honest. Or the extended world building, where I can sink into a single world for a really long time. This one, all I have to do is a single voice, and then each book is such a different setting that I get different rules and I get different characters, so that helps me be able to focus, I guess. But yeah, once I figured these out, they're the easiest and most fun. It just took me a dozen years to get there. And I had several runs at this series. Like I started it about 2.5 years before I ever sold it. And I would write a little bit, wasn't there yet. I would go work on other things, go back to it, write a little bit, wasn't there yet, work on other things, until I was finally ready to just sit down and commit to a Sinister Summer. So, yeah. No, this book is pretty, I wanted it to, it's the series starter, but it's also the introduction. So it's pretty, it's pretty streamlined, I would say. I definitely introduce, as the series goes on, I introduce more and more characters. They make more friends. There are reoccurring characters. One thing I will say is I always wanted it to be a longer series, and I was really, really lucky that my editor agreed, because initially they only bought 3 books. And as I was getting ready to write book 3, I was like, I can't write this as both an end to the series and also a middle book in the series. And she was really, really wonderful and agreed to just go ahead and give me 2 more. I easily could have made it 9 books just because I love writing them so much. So there's definitely a lot more material, like backstories and side characters and all those things that if I get the chance to, I would love to add on to the series, which sounds weird now when all I have is 1 book out. But, again, I'm done with 4 of them. So in my head, we're very far in this series, which also makes it really confusing to talk about. But yeah, definitely, like, as the series goes on, I have more characters, and I would love to get to spend more time with those various characters that are introduced. So another thing that I did with each book is sort of anchored on classic literature. So this one is, I referenced the Brontes and that sort of like gothic romance over the top drama that they were all about. And then book 2 is called Vampiric Vacation. You get one guess what classic novel that one is. Yes, no. It's Dracula. But maybe Frankenstein will show up in a future book. Who knows? I know it will. But so that was another fun thing to sort of anchor them and have these sly references that maybe children aren't going to get, but hopefully if their parents are reading aloud to them or their parents are smart and understand that middle grade is absolutely delightful to read and just read it on their own. Or you don't even have to have kids to read middle grade. Like that's a cool secret that I think all of you already know. Yeah, so there are a lot of like sly references to those, including one of my favorite plays on word jokes in here. You'll know it when you find it. It has to do with the broad taste. You'll know it when you find it. Yeah. Any other questions? Oh, yes.
Were there any moments or scenes that were edited down or edited out because they were deemed too scary?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't think in this book. I definitely had to make it really clear that no one died in the wave pool. They only went in and never came out. There's a distinction there. Because I didn't want the threat of like death looming over children. Yeah, I don't think there was anything in this book. I think in future books, there were definitely some things where we were like, this is maybe a little bit too intense, so we need to tweak it so that it's less threatening or comes to a quicker resolution. But no, not in this one. I was very aware of who I was writing for, and this is not a series where I wanted to push those limits. I definitely have had books where I have pushed limits, particularly in YA, but not with this one. Yes. Yeah. No, they are with Aunt Sophronia the whole time. And that's part of the mystery is why her specifically. And she's actually not the threat. They meet someone in this park, and he has small mean eyes and a large mean mustache. And he's pretty mean. So yeah, the threat is part of the mystery, and the other people are part of the mystery. Aunt Sophronia is not. She's maybe not an ideal caregiver, but she does actually care about them. So yeah. Yes.
What is one summer trip you hope makes its way to a book?
Oh, I did have really fun time brainstorming and like making a list of like really typical summer vacation ideas. So I had, the water park. The next one they go to sort of like a spa hotel. I don't want to give away the future ones. I will say the one that I didn't get to do, if it had been a 9-book series, book 8 would have been a road trip where they hit all of the previous vacation spots. And then, had all the road trip things of like, let's stop on the side of the road and see that giant dinosaur at a gas station. Why is there a giant dinosaur at the gas station? No one knows. So that one actually would have been really fun, and maybe hopefully I can extend the series or write a spin-off series where we get to do that. But yeah, it was really fun getting to be like, okay, what were the iconic vacations of my childhood and how can I recreate them? I will say they will not be visiting the amazement park. If any of you know what the amazement park is, I do not send these children there. So, yeah. Any other questions? Good. Okay. So I'm just going to say in closing, I love this book so much. I love this series so much. I'm so happy that I get to work on it. I have an incredible editor, and my publisher at Delacorte are wonderful. I hope you really enjoy it, and I hope if you have any middle grade readers in your life that you share it with them, or you selfishly hoard it for yourself and tell them to get their copy of the library. That is also fine. I definitely have copies of my books where my kids are like, "Can I read that one?" I'm like, "Get your own copy." I get them their own copy, but I've got my fancy edition of The Once and Future King. That is not for my children. That is to sit on the shelf and be beautiful forever. You can have the beat up paperback one. So anyway, thank you so much for coming. Thank you, Mysterious Galaxy, for hosting me. You guys are my favorite, but you already know that. And then also, just putting in a plug, I have another book out in July. If you're ever like, gosh, I wonder if maybe I should release, 4 books in 5 months. Is that fun? It's not. Don't do it. But in July, I have Padawan, which is the story of teenage Obi-Wan Kenobi. If you want a signed and personalized copy, this is the only place to get them. So order and pre-order through Mysterious Galaxy. Also, the sequel to Wretched Waterpark comes out in September. So you don't even have to wait until, I don't think you even have to wait until fall. It's still summer when the next one comes out. So that one comes out in September. And then book 3 will be announced very shortly and also come out not that long after. So thank you so much for coming.
Thank you so much, all you internet people. We're going to go ahead and end the broadcast now for the in-store signing portion. Remember, you can still get your own copy of Wretched Waterpark if you hit the link below and go to our website. Bye.